The minor 2-5-1 is often considered a bit more difficult. You need more scales, and we're less familiar with the minor 7-flat-5 and the dominant 7-flat-9 sounds. But actually you can quite easily get started improvising over this progression and both really nail the changes and play something that sounds like music, not just exercises. So in this video I'm going to go over how you can take 2 arpeggios and then step by step add the rest in there and really start improvising over this progression. My name is Jens Larsen, learn jazz, make music. The first thing to do is to start playing the chords, because you want to improvise over the chords and you want to have the sound of them in your ears, because then you can hear how what you're playing when you're soloing really fits with the chords. I'm just going to do a basic set of chords for this. The A half diminished would be something like this. D7, so I'm using a D7 flat 13. Don't worry too much about the extensions, it's just something that fits the basic sound that we're using. And then I'm using a G minor 6-9. And you should try and play these chords, get them into your ears and get used to how that sounds so that you're ready to solo over them. Something like this. And once you get a little bit more used to how these sounds and you can play the basic voicings, then start adding a little bit more rhythm, maybe a leading note and maybe a few other melody notes, and that way just make it into something that's really a musical thing for you. Now you've played the chords and you have an idea about how they sound, and then I'm going to show you 2 arpeggios that are going to help you improvise and really nail the changes over this progression. And the first one we need is an A half diminished arpeggio. And we also need a G minor 6 arpeggio. Now you're probably wondering, where's the D7? Because of course there are 3 chords and we only have 2 arpeggios. I'm going to use a small trick for that one, because if we take a look at the A half diminished arpeggio, then in the middle here I have a G. Now if I change that to an F sharp, then I have this arpeggio. And that's actually an F sharp diminished arpeggio. That's not that important, but that's the one that we can use on the D7. So we're just really reusing the A half diminished arpeggio, changing one note, just to make it a little bit easier. And the F sharp diminished arpeggio is in fact what you call the arpeggio from the third of the chord. And I could explain that in more detail, but I have a lot of other videos where I talk about this. So for now, let's just go with this works, it sounds good, and that's all we need. Now that we have the arpeggios, then it makes sense to just try and practice them on the progression, because then you can hear how they fit in the places where you want to improvise with them. So a basic version of that would be something like this. And we can also take a descending version so that we get the higher part of the arpeggios in there as well. That would be something like this. Now you can start practicing to make lines, compose lines that work with the progression. And you'll notice that we actually have only 1 note difference between the arpeggios that we're using on the A half diminished and the D7. And that 1 note difference is that it's the G that becomes the F sharp. So if you want to nail those changes, then the easiest way to do that is just to try and play that F sharp on beat 1 when we hit the D7. That's going to make it really clear, you're really nailing the changes there, and it's going to give the line a much more natural flow where you can really hear we're going here. And in the same way, when you move from the D7 to the G minor 6, then try and see if you can make the transition really smooth by just going to the closest note in the next arpeggio. So if you're on a C on the D7, then you can go down to a B flat, or if you're on the E flat, then you can go down to the D. So in that way you're going to make a much more natural sounding melody, something like this. As you can hear, it's also possible to change chord on the fore and, so you're just anticipating the chord by just starting right before the chord is actually coming, and that's just a great way to have a little bit more variation and not always sit on the heavy downbeats. So what I wanted to do with this is really just to try and play through these exercises, try to make your own, because essentially you want to compose lines like this to the point where you can just naturally make them, and then you can take that into improvisation where you're just starting to solo, always hitting the changes and always playing strong melodies like this. Now you can add the scale notes around the arpeggios and in that way get some more notes that you can use when you're improvising. We need 3 scales for this progression. So for the A half diminished, we need a G minor scale, just G natural minor or B flat major, whatever you want to call it. And for the D7, we need a G harmonic minor scale. And then for the G minor 6, there we need a G melodic minor scale. So the easiest way to get used to these different sounds is probably just to play those scales on the progression with the chords. And you can do that in an exercise like this. But once you want to start improvising, then it's also useful to just check out the entire position for each of them. That could be something like this. I don't know if you noticed this, but when I'm turning the scales into complete positions, then I'm actually using caged fingering positions, and that is because I made this exercise, I made this as a lesson to one of my students, and he uses caged, so that just seemed the way to go, and I just kept it when I made it into a video. Fingering systems are not that important, but if you were wondering, since I always talked about how I don't use caged myself, then that's why. Now that we have the scales in there, then we can get started making lines, adding this material. As you can tell, I'm really still just basing it off the arpeggio and then adding the scale notes in between, because of course I still want to really connect with the sound of the chord, and the arpeggio, the chord tones, are really just much stronger for this. So this is all just A half diminished arpeggio, and then we get leading note up to the chord tone. Again, really just using the F as a leading note for the F sharp. So now we're on D7. Skipping up, again just a chord tone. And of course also the third on the G minor 6. Here I'm still just using the scale notes as diatonic passing notes. So I'm starting on a chord tone, the third, going down to the root, and then adding the B flat as a passing note, diatonic passing note. And then the rest is really just arpeggio. So again, hitting the F sharp on the D7, so that's clear. And then skipping down to the fifth of that chord, and then up to the flat 9, resolving to the D, the fifth of the G minor 6. And then in this case, I'm actually ending on the 9th, so really bringing that 9th sound out there. And of course you can also target extensions, and you want to experiment with that, but make sure that you can first just really get the sound of the chord across. In this video, I'm focusing on the basic arpeggios and really just getting the sound of the chord out there. But once you start improvising, then it makes sense that you want to have some more options. And you really want to check out some different arpeggios and triads and pentatonic scales, because they're all just different melodies that you can create with in your own solos. And if you want to check that out for the minor 7 flat 5 chord, then check out this video where I'm covering a lot of different stuff and also showing you how it sounds and how you can use it.